Good, good. Well, welcome again, everyone, to this program by the New England Poetry Club, where we are delighted to have Diane Seuss, Martha Silano, Eileen Cassinetto, and Luisa A. Igloria. Um, I will introduce each poet before they read. Um, we are recording this, and so it'll be on our YouTube channel. You can fairly promptly, and I'll propagate that link. We'll have the three poets reading. We'll have three poets reading. I'll explain what that means in a minute. Um, and then afterwards, we'll have time for Q&A. And when we get to the Q&A part, I will make a request for how to do that, how to actually get questions into the session. Oh, and I didn't mention my name. That might be of some vague interest to someone. My name is David Miller, and I am on the board of the New England Poetry Club. I'm the chair of programming for the New England Poetry Club. So the order for tonight is we will have Diane Seuss, who is reading for Martha Silano. So reading Martha Silano's work. Then Eileen Cassinetto, and then Luisa A. Igloria. So I will now I'll do the introductions for both Martha and Diane. And later on in the session, there'll be links for everyone that I'll put back in the chat. So we'll begin. First of all, for Martha. Martha Silano has authored 7 poetry books, including The Little Office of the Immaculate Conception, winner of the 2010 Saturnalia Books Poetry Prize and a Washington State book finalist. Most recently, this one we call Ours, winner of the 2023 Blue Lynx Prize. Acre Books will release Terminal Surreal, her book about living with ALS, in September 2025. Her poems have appeared in Poetry Daily, Verse Daily, Paris Review, Agni, North American Review, American Poetry Review, New Ohio Review, Prairie Schooner, Crab Orchard Review, Beloit Poetry Journal, Kenyon Review Online, Blackbird, Coppernickel, Mississippi Review, and elsewhere. Her poem Love appears in Best American Poetry 2009. And then reading for Martha is Diane Seuss, who is the author of the poetry collections Frank Sonnets, winner of the Pulitzer Prize and a National Book Critics Circle Award, Still Life with Two Dead Peacocks and a Girl, finalist of the LA Times Book Prize Award, and finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. Four-Legged Girl, in 2015, finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. Wolf Lake, White Gown Blown Open, 2010, winner of the 2009 Juniper Prize for Poetry, and It Blows You Hollow, 1998. Her most recent book, Modern Poetry, was released by Grey Wolf Press in March of this year. So thank you, and we'll turn this over to Diane, reading some of Martha Silano's work.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, David, and the New England Poetry Club. And I appreciate Eileen and Luisa for the work they'll be sharing with us tonight. And of course, Martha Silano for allowing me to give voice to her brilliant and life-enhancing poems. Thank you, Martha. I'm going to read 3 of Martha's poems. Martha, I just wrote a foreword for a new one selected for Martha. And so I know everything about Martha, but she tends to do environmentally centered, climate change centered, deeply autobiographical poems in which, for instance, femaleness and the precarious place we find ourselves as women serve as allegory for what's happening in the natural world and vice versa. When we say it's the little things, we really do mean it. A friend announcing at the end of a long phone call in which she shares her love of the red shoes and Moulin Rouge, I love you. How good that feels when you wake up in the middle of the night, the worth of that unexpected gesture, like a lover who cleans out the dishwasher filter without being asked. It's the taste of that first sip of coffee, rich and strong, the Mr. Coffee cup warmer on your desk. It's having the right pen. It's a full water bottle, a piece of orange cranberry bread, warm and moist, crunchy with walnuts. We also love the big things, like Fatu and Najin, the last two white rhinos, a mother and her daughter. You can watch them on YouTube, snorkeling in the Kenyan dust, the calming hum of insects all around them, which is more of the little things. Because mostly it's those, the insects, outweighing our human bulk 17 times. Bush crickets and pillbugs, botflies and army ants that, when the time comes, will make quick work of our little and big bodies, our veined and ventricled hearts. This is what they said, that they'd studied 4% of the sky, that there's this thing called the ionosphere, that it's like looking at the sky from the bottom of a swimming pool, that they were counting black holes with instruments 10 times better than before, plus algorithms, plus all these words I didn't understand. But 4% of the sky, in that narrow band to the north, they found 25,000, which means in the remaining 96%, there could be close to 500,000 more. And that's what they plan to do, count every black hole in the sky. Count every event horizon, every instance of swirling infinite blackness, of the place of no return, of the sucking power no Dyson has ever known, the place of spaghettification. The who knew there were so many, the who knew they were visible to us, not just one, but 25,000 each in a galaxy like our own, substantial, giant armed, born of what spilled from Hera's breast when she realized she was nursing another woman's child, the baby Hercules, with its 100,000 million stars, with its 100 billion planets, with its one planet, with one ocean. This one we float on. This one we call ours. And the last Martha, letter to a post-apocalyptic cockroach, with apologies to Matthew Olsman. You probably think we hated frost, rime, drought, hail, icy rivers, icy glaciers, icy shelves, keeping icy glaciers from plunging into the sea. Probably you think we hated gorillas, orangutans, Edith's checker spot, the 9-spotted lady beetle, as much as we loved Toyota Tundras, styrofoam coolers, Starbucks lids, the fluorocarbons in our extra hold Aquanet. Knowing every minute what we were doing, metric ton by metric ton, I bet you think we were incapable of dancing wildly in the aisles at a What's Left of the Dead show. But you'd be wrong. Back then, when we still had the Emir leopard, a whopping total of 84 because poachers killed them for their bones, steeped them in rice wine, sold it as medicine. When we still had Western red cedars, sword fern, Oregon grape, sellow, twin flower, inside out flower, queen's cup, red huckleberry, and the one-sided pyrola. Man, did we ever admire the 44,000-mile migration route of the Arctic tern. Hard to believe, but there were seasons. Skiing, low-lying vacation homes, cities named Manhattan, New Orleans, Miami. Grass dyed in the summer, turned emerald in September. Do I have to tell you it wasn't all panic or worry? That some in protest threw soup at famous art, but pretty much the days went on as they always had, while headlines shared that the Antarctic was warming 5 times faster than the global average. What were we doing? I guess you want to know. Combusting our engines, turning up the thermostat, paying 8 cents at the checkout line for a paper bag, buying stuff, then donating it to the global south or tossing it into methane seething landfills. The ocean warmed 1.5 degrees, which to many seemed piddly. Most didn't know water expands as it warms. Polar ice sheets thinned. Gale force winds caused concrete piers to pound into each other, collapse. Rivers fell from the sky while we fought hard for our freedom to eat beef whenever we liked. And then we were gone. And then, am I right? The earth sighed, broke into a blissful smile. Thank you, Martha, for those poems.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Diane. Um, when we get to the end of the readings, we can all really unmute and applaud simultaneously and audibly and with great cacophony. So we'll do our on-screen reactions before then, but that was wonderful. That was spectacular. Thank you. Well, we'll go to Eileen Cassinetto. Eileen Cassinetto is a 2021 Academy of American Poets Laureate Fellow and co-founder of Paloma Press. She is also co-editor with Luisa A. Igloria of Dear Human at the Edge of Time, Poems on Climate Change in the United States, 2023, a companion to the 5th National Climate Assessment, and The Nature of Our Times, Poems on America's Lands, Waters, Wildlife, and Other Natural Wonders. Oh, yes, that is a companion to the 1st National Nature Assessment. Her poems have appeared in Anthropocene, Poetry, Rust and Moth, and West Trestle Review. And Eileen will read a couple of poems from the Dear Human anthology, and then, of course, from her own work. So, Eileen.
Thank you, David and Hillary. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Thank you, Diane, for graciously reading Martha's poems. And Martha, I am so grateful to you for being one of the very first people who generously offered resources when we launched the Dear Human anthology last year. Martha is also a contributor. It's an honor to share space with all of you and, of course, with my co-editor and friend, Luisa A. Igloria. Last year, Luisa, Jeremy, and I released the anthology Dear Human at the Edge of Time, Poems on Climate Change in the United States to support the 5th National Climate Assessment, using the language of poetry, which is one of witness and community, alongside the language of climate science. The poem I'd like to read tonight is Our Dear Human community poem, which features lines from the anthology as well as submissions from the public, which we co-curated with David Hassler for the American Geophysical Union. Dear Human at the Edge of Time, a community poem. Say, anyone here seen a jump frog lately? Not the saucy poster frogs making the circuit of nature museums, but the hearty bulls who advertised their longing, who puffed up and peed in your berry-stained hands. Who can deny that sea stars are stunning? The way their arms sparkle with jewels, the way they regenerate. I have only so many limbs, and I can't grow back what I've lost. When did we lose our way to a place where we value roads over rivers, parking lots over prairies, resorts over reefs? It doesn't seem like you should be able to hold panic like a too-full cup, but all day it sloshes and slips inside of me. These days, it's all about walking lightly on this earth, listening to all who are speaking beyond words. If the songbirds can still sing, then we can still hope. If the roots of the old pines protruding from the asphalt slow your walk, then stop to thank them for this moment, to steady the feet, to look beyond the wire fences where wild wheat glows golden and soft in the sun, as if discovering what light can do for the first time. Have you heard the whispers that ride along the breeze and come out in the rustle of the leaves, that live in the dewdrops as they sparkle on the morning grass, in the atoms that vibrate to make apple skins and shrimp shells? They travel through the sun's rays and come out in refractions. Have you heard the whispers? Listen, they are everywhere. I found a way to pray. Through my feet, I reach down. There's something animate, mycelial, that touches me back. It's a species of love, a thinking spike, a zinging circuit of energy. And what if we could stop it all, after all? Could stop the change, too swift for us to grasp, listening instead to the maple's sweet dusk drip in the metal bucket? Can we learn to live in sync with nature and in harmony with one another? The stranger asked, "What has kept you from singing?" I had no answer, save for this melody within me, rising and rising. Look inward at that core of ourselves, remember our past, and decide who we wish to be. When we tell the story of how we survived the collapse, we might say, like birds, we learned to move as one. We grew lighter and lengthened our wings. I was going to read the poem I wrote for the anthology, but at the last minute, I decided to read a poem I wrote 5 years ago, which I feel is more fitting. At the heart of this poem is the question of what it truly means to be an American, and to remind everyone that our country was built on the idea that we are all equal and that there is a place for all of our stories here. There are no kings in America. We are not that kind of country. We are a sanctuary for the hungry, the homeless, the huddled, held together by an idea our immigrant fathers believed in. Rendered, it meant independence. Pursued, it kindled war, ordnance, a fighting chance. 40,000 musket balls by themselves did not shape the boundaries on which we map our days. To draw our borders, we needed more than fire cakes, more than a pound of meat with bone and gristle, or salt fish and a gill of peas. We needed the faith and grit of people who were not yet Americans. To be an American is to recognize the sacrifice of the widow and the orphan. It is to understand the weft of tent cities expecting caravans, and the heft of a child in a camp not meant for children, or sitting before a judge awaiting judgment. What do we say to the native whose lands we now inhabit? What do we say to our immigrant fathers who held certain truths to be self-evident? Do we now still pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, our sacred honor? There are no kings in America, only gilded men we can topple again and again. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Aileen. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. That was a pleasure. It was very invigorating. Well, I'll introduce then Luisa A. Igloria. She is the author of 14 poetry books and 5 chapbooks. Most recently, Caulbearer, winner of the 2023 Immigrant Writing Series Prize from Black Lawrence Press. She is lead editor of Dear Human at the Edge of Time, and then, as we've heard, and The Nature of Our Times, forthcoming next year, 2025. Various national and international literary awards include the 2019 Crab Orchard Open Competition Award for Poetry, the 2018 Center for the Book Arts Letterpress Chapbook Prize, the 2015 inaugural Resurgence Poetry Prize, the world's first major eco-poetry award, 2014 May Swenson Poetry Prize, and the 2009 Ernest Sandine Poetry Prize, among others. And Luisa, I apologize. I should have asked you for the pronunciation of this, and I failed to do so, which I'm sorry. I'm rather than fumble it, I'm going to say she is the recipient of a Lifetime Achievement Award in Poetry from the National Union of Writers in the Philippines. My apologies for not checking pronunciation in advance. And she is also an 11-time recipient of the Palanca Award, the Philippines' highest literary prize, and its Hall of Fame distinction. She is Poet Laureate Emerita of the Commonwealth of Virginia 2020 and 2022. A 21 Academy of American Poets Laureate Fellow and a Luisa A. Jaffe Professor of Creative Writing and English at Old Dominion University. So let's welcome Luisa.
Thank you so much, David, and thank you, Hillary. Thank you to everyone who's here joining us tonight. It's such an honor to read alongside Eileen, Martha, and Diane. So what I'm going to do is I will read maybe 3 short poems from my new book, Caulbearer, which was released in August from Black Lawrence Press, and a couple of newer poems as a way to celebrate 14 years on November 20 of my daily writing practice. So part of the artist's statement and description that I wrote for Black Lawrence Press reads, in many cultures, a call is considered talismanic, and a child born with it possessing luck or protection and sometimes even second sight. As an immigrant and a writer in the diaspora, I see the call also as a metaphor, a veiled interval of transition from one state to another. In the title poem, 2 central images are the yucca flower and the yucca moth. The moths are responsible for pollinating the yucca plants, and their larvae depend only on yucca seeds for food. I have a little essay also on Poetry Daily for their What Sparks Poetry series, in which I say a little bit more about that. So I'll start with this poem and offer it in the spirit of mutuality, which so many of us are looking to guide us in these times. Caulbearer, pheasant and nuthatch, five-petaled flower, emerald feather suspended in veils. We don't know how long the world can hold such specimens of tenderness, how far the glacial drifts can ferry such tombs, immaculate, before they themselves turn into ghosts. Everything writhes before the dream discards what it calculates for reduction. And yet the yucca moth delivers its eggs inside the flower, even as leaves sharpen their bayonet points. At dusk, we scan the horizon for anchors and tents. We lean into the wind, hungry for the brass tinkle of hawkbells and the trance-like drone of Hegelung. If we split these reeds down their length, how many of us can ride out the coming flood before sunlight returns or we've softened into moss? So besides history, I turn to indigenous folklore and mythology also as sources for poems. I will read two poems that have a goddess in them. The first is from a Cordillera folktale about the origin of white and red rice and the sacrifice that that goddess makes. And in another poem, I try to focus more on the generosity and abundance that lives in the universe, which we are all invited to take part of. First one. I weep from a dream of the goddess who sits with her shoulders above the clouds, goats and tin-roofed houses dotting the hills of her green quilted lap. How can she sleep when there's always some state of emergency? Drought, a flood, animals trying to surface from out of oil marbled waters, famine, war. I think I can deal with those parts better than the one in which she squeezes her breasts so the milk flowing out turns into rice. Rice rain pours down every granary, and the people hold rice feasts, make rice wine, feed pap to babies tired of sucking old, dry-knuckled fingers. But hunger is always hungry. It won't ever be appeased. I weep from the dream where she squeezes so hard, blood flows out of her breasts. Wild red, still highly prized to this day. I ache from the effort she made and the thought of sacrifices that never end. You can smell in the air the deep wells of our sadness, the fog, a milky bandage covering the gutted earth. And here's the other goddess. This is a poem called Ambrosia. You are tired of what cloys, what heavies your tongue, as if to coat your body in whipped oil and vinegar. You are drained and puckered as a sheet left too many years in salt water, then parched as a plant struggling to keep its rousable nature. You close your eyes and imagine fruit as color in tiny cubes paired from cathedral windows. The light in them, pap of washed sweet rice. You return to the time you don't know peach or apple or navel orange, only the gold of mangoes, coral sweetness of papaya ripening on a tree in the backyard, resembling a goddess. Garland of breasts full to bursting atop the pillar of her body, open hands gesturing and calling you to eat. And thank you. I'll finish with two poems. One is a haibun. This one I'll read Now, it's called pockets. You keep your hands in them to get warm. You slip your hands into them when you don't know what else to do. A pose that supposedly conveys an air of nonchalance, a casual vibe like, I'm chill, or don't mind me, I'm just leaning against the wall here, trying to blend with the atmosphere. You've learned to stay just like this, especially when you're unsure of how to mix and mingle, make small talk. After a while, even the waiters walking around the room with little trays of hors d'oeuvres forget about you. In 1991, two German tourists came upon a mummified corpse frozen halfway to its chest in a pocket of ice somewhere on the border between Austria and Italy. An archaeologist determined that this guy, christened Otzi the Iceman, lived around the year 3300 BCE. When he was found, he was still wearing a cloak of woven grass, shoes and leggings of animal skin. His belt had a pouch dangling from it, an outside pocket containing a flake of flint and all made of bone, some kind of scraper and drill, dried fungus. The contents of his stomach included partly digested food from at least 2 meals before he was killed: ibex meat, wheat, deer and chamois meat, herbs, roots, fruit. Inside the gastric pocket, he'd also harbored whipworms. And you could go on, exploring the body as if it were a bottomless hamper, an envelope of assorted curiosities. You feel around coat pockets and find lint balls, crumpled receipts, an old piece of gum, quarters, one half of a pair of lost earrings. In the early 1900s, there was something called a beer pocket inside a men's jacket and vest, expressly for carrying a bottle of alcohol. Women used to be able to carry a square of cloth, yarn, or thread, keys and scissors in ample pouch pockets. But now, if women's clothes have pockets, they're so much smaller than men's. You'd think someone decided they'd better not be hiding any secrets, better not be given extra space of any kind. And for my last poem, I will finish with this poem titled Tendril, and trying to see if I can paste. The Tibetan way of rendering this word is in the chat. I learned it from a friend who is a scholar of Tibetan literature and religious texts. Tendril. When our friend, the Tibetan studies scholar, teaches us this word, she puts her hands together, touching fingertips. It means what the Buddha said: if this exists, that exists. If this ceases to exist, that also ceases to exist. That is, everything, every experience comes into being from its dependence on and relationship with other things. Just as fog skims off the oyster-colored waters of the bay to later pearl in the skin folds of heavy rain clouds, just as bitter rinds of fruit retreat from the hungry mouth, so too do we live in tensile connection to other beings. So I will rejoice to learn of your happiness and grieve with you because your sorrow is our common sorrow. Though I am often lonely, I am aware of a brighter filament still at the edge of my consciousness. I know it's there, even when it's not there. And I refuse to believe that even hatred or emptiness root in only one place, with no further promise of changing into something else. Someone once told me that if I forget to pay attention, I might miss small signs and portents, altering the color of an often terrible world. I might think this moment is all there is, though the wheel never stops turning. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Luisa. Well, please, everyone, feel free to unmute and audibly applaud if you like.
Yes.
Yeah. As everyone's audio cuts everyone else's audio out, but yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. And you've noticed there's a lot of commendations coming in on the chat, a lot of enthusiastic remarks, and I'm planning to before we leave, before the session shuts down, save the chat, and I will send it at least out to the poets, and so you can see what all the chat was. There's a lot of good stuff there. So we can move into Q&A, and let me say a couple things about that. When we do move into Q&A, I think we can unspotlight me. We don't need to spotlight anybody, but just for the moment, we can stay with this. So we probably have about 20 minutes, if there's that much. I bet there is. 20 minutes-ish. Probably the best way to do this, at least the way we would recommend, is if you can use the raise hand function. I will show you. It may vary how you find it, but I have it under React at the bottom of the screen. So when I click on React, there's raise hand, and look, I have raised my hand, and now I will lower my hand. That's different from other hand things, like it's not this, for example. It's specifically raise hand, because the reason why is that makes your Zoom rectangle the most visible and the easiest to see. Okay, so if you can do that. If that's not working for some reason, please type questions into the chat if you want to. That's a little harder to see. What we'd ask is if we cannot do this, just sort of like unmute and like launch a question into the general space, because that may just be interrupting someone else. The other thing is that we'll include all four poets in the chat, and what Martha will do is she'll type her answers into the chat. So we'll give her plenty of time to do that, but Diane will also read her answers aloud. So, okay. I will actually start this off with a question, and I think we can take the spotlight off me now. Yeah, thanks. I'll start this off with a question, and it's the kind of question that I think is probably on everyone's mind. And anyone can answer this to begin with. Any of the poets. Martha, you probably want to type an answer, of course. In the aftermath of this election, what thoughts would you like to share in any connection, but perhaps in particular, about the work of poetry and community, or however you want to frame an answer to that question? So we can begin with any of our four poets. It's a Yes, Luisa, yes.
Yeah, so I guess in the past week, since we saw the outcome of this election, we've been hit by so many feelings of helplessness, outrage, distress. And for myself, I know I turn to poetry to try to process what seems inchoate. And it's in poetry that I feel I'm able to find some language and images for what often seems unspeakable. And many in my communities, both local and virtual, have also expressed that in these dark days, they're also turning to the words of poets and the visions of artists to feel at least less alone. And I may have only a small bit to play in the general energy of things, but I know I will continue to teach poetry and writing and literature. I want to keep doing this and have conversations with my students about the world we want to have and the world that we will continue to work to build. And so I guess that's where I am right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Luisa. Eileen, you have raised your hand, yes.
So like me, like Luisa, what helps in keeping me centered is to write and interrogate poems of beauty and fury as a reminder that we all carry within us a world of both trauma and grace. And that poetry, if we let it, can help us find a way out of the brokenness of our circumstances.
Thank you. Oh, Diane, you're muted, actually. If you're, yeah.
Sorry about that. You'd think I never Zoomed before. So Martha has a statement. Martha says, I'm concerned about climate, refugees, and the border being most likely closed to people bearing the brunt of the US's overuse of fossil fuels. To deny refugees entry into the US feels like genocide to me. I mean, aside from what others have said, the other poets have said here, I'll just add that whatever this is we're doing right now, right here, shows me the potency of poetry in a time like this. Many of us, most of us, are still reeling, and it's hard to even be articulate about all that we're feeling. But listening to Luisa's and Eileen's poems and reading Martha's has helped me a great deal tonight. And just, I look at the responses to the poems on the chat, and to know just what depth of feeling people experience when they hear these poems. So I just want to say the courage of articulation is the best we can do right now. And when we share it with others, we're completing a circle that without violence is in direct opposition to fascism.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Diane. Let's open it up. Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask?
Can I add a Martha here?
Oh, yeah.
Martha writes, I recommend the book, The Great Displacement by Jack Bittler, and also Disposable City by Mario Alejandra Ariza. And those are in the chat.
Good, thank you. We have, the space is open if you have questions. I actually have, there is one other question, and it's, well, it's a more general question for anyone to answer, really, which is, for all four of you, would you be interested to say a word about or two about what has inspired your latest collections? What has, I mean, you've talked about that a bit, I think, but maybe more deliberately. What led you to what you've most recently published or will be publishing soon? Again, anybody can start. Yep. Well, Diane, you're the only one of the four who has not muted their mic, so that doesn't mean.
Well, I can say my new book, Modern Poetry, comes directly out of our experience, my experience during the pandemic, my isolation. I used to love solitude, and I still do, but that's different from isolation. And I live alone. My dog died during it, and I just felt very alone, and very angry and very distant from what this country seem to have become. That's before this election. And then I found myself confronting a really scary question, which was, can poetry mean at this time? Can poetry be? What can it be in these times? And so the book sets out to confront that question in my own life. And to do so, I sort of go back to my own, what I call cobbled education in poetry. I'm pretty much self-taught, and my roots are in the rural working class, and so then I sort of move through that into a connection with John Keats and Romanticism itself, and the objectivity, I guess, of love and of poetry that can be a kind of beauty. So I guess what I'm saying is that book really takes on the impact of tyranny on my imaginative life. Now, where I go now is anybody's guess. But I'd love to hear them from the others and from Martha, if Martha wants.
Yes, Luisa, please.
Yeah, this book that I wrote, I think the poems that went into this book come out of what I describe elsewhere as a long period of anticipatory grieving, because many of these poems were also being written in the time that my mother was declining in health, and finally she passed away in September of last year. And she passed away in the Philippines, in Baguio City, my home city there, and I could not go and be with her. So a lot of these poems also, I think, try to give voice to what many of us who live in the diaspora might be feeling also. I hear people laud the resilience and the cultural values which center community and extended family rather than only nuclear units, for instance. And while this is true, the painful effects of distance and separation are also very real. And as a mother who also has at certain times of my life had to leave children behind, I know there's not one template for how to navigate this experience, and that is individual and it can't be generalized. At the same time, I feel like it's also connected to so many of the threads that tie us to historical conditions of trauma, the colonial histories we have had to endure. So there's that, and also the idea that nostalgia is something that can, I feel, sometimes be over romanticized. So part of what I'm trying to do, I think, in the poems of this book is to try and see what else, what other meanings I can mine from that burden. Eileen, I love what you said earlier, that we carry both trauma and grace. So I think the other part of that equation sometimes is easy to forget. So I think I'm trying to make my way to what I say in that title poem as the tenderness, which I hope still remains in the world, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yes, Eileen.
So I'll let Luisa talk about how the anthology came about. She is our lead editor. I just so personally, as a poet, I cannot separate the issue of colonialism from climate change, for instance. So in my own work, poetry allows me to bear witness, to show why an issue is personal and where it hurts, and as well as offer a unique perspective that can hopefully transcend barriers. So with the Dear Human anthology, it was really an opportunity to tell my story and allow others to tell their story as well of climate justice. Luisa, maybe.
Yeah, you put it very well already, Eileen. And the way this book came together, mostly I just went knocking on doors and asking people if they would like to collaborate with us. And what we really wanted, which is part of our guidelines, we did not want poems with the jargon of climate change because we wanted the poems to speak to the on the ground lived experience of what it means to be part of this time that we are inhabiting and seeing all the changes and taking stock of where we might go from there, mourning and grieving, but also trying to find things to celebrate and hope for, or at least that was the hope as we put the anthology together. And it's a similar aspiration for the book that is coming out next year, which we are collaborating on with David Hassler of the Wick Poetry Center. So this new anthology is The Nature of Our Times, and we also invite all of you to go to the website and contribute right now your poems on the nature of our times. We have an online gallery and you will contribute your works there. But at the end of this year, we will sit down, the co-editorial board will sit down and decide how many of these poems we can accommodate in the print anthology, which is coming out in September next year.
Good, thank you. And I see, yeah, Eileen has just put a link into The Nature of Our Times to that and to that site.
Martha has a comment here.
That's right.
My book derived from the extreme love of our planet and the natural world, and my concern for sea level rise, worsening storms, and how Central America and the global South will pay for our oil dependency, as will so many other species. This one we call Ours, one of Martha's books, is and was, excuse me, my passionate cry to recognize the perilous position we put our planet, in which we put our planet. Earth will not be fine, but many of us will. Earth will be fine, excuse me, but many of us will not be. But I also wanted to share my joy of the miraculousness of getting to live on this planet and experience its miraculous beauty.
Thank you.
And then she said, okay, too miraculous and miraculousness, but I guess that's how I feel. From microbes and fungi to the white rhinos, I'm in awe of the beauty of this planet. Humans have, for some reason, done a lot of damage to, starting with the extinction of the giant mammals, and yet.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and yet. Well, thank you, everyone. This is I'll put all the rest of the links in, I think, at this very moment. Here we are, that we've had. I want to thank you, everyone who's given your time this evening. I was looking forward to it. I'm sure we all were, and I feel even more gratified than my expectations. Let's put it that way. This is really quite wonderful. So I guess I think, can I send the chat to all attendees? That's a very good question. I will see if I'll see if we can do that. If there's a way we can harvest. Yeah, Hillary, my co-host, does not know. But what I will do for certain is I will send the chat to all of the poets, and then you four can send it out to your contacts if you choose to. I mean, you can do that, and that may very well cover a great many of the attendees. So that may be the best we can do. But yeah, we can propagate it a little bit more than we have done. So yes, and Kim Coveney says thanks, and I have to take note that Kim. Okay, so you're in Barcelona. So what time is it? Like 3 in the morning or what? She nods. It's 3 in the morning. Yeah, 2 in the morning. Yes. That's above and beyond. But so yeah, I guess we can stop recording now. That'll be, and then yeah. Thank you all.